Hello, and welcome to season 4 of Awkward Family Conversations, where we try to help millennials and Gen Z Zoomers, like my daughter, figure this thing called life, figure it all out. So this is our first episode of season 4. Our emphasis in season 4 is going to be focusing our attention on life's transitions and milestones. We've talked a lot about jobs in the past, a lot about health, all kinds, macroeconomic, generational, big trends and stuff, but we're going to go a little bit more personal, I think, this time. I am joined, as always, by my younger daughter, Addie. Addie likes body art. She has a lot of tattoos. Her most recent tattoo, I believe, was the one she got when we were visiting in August to celebrate her college commencement, where she and her sister got tribute tattoos to each other on her arm, on their arms at their elbow. Callie's middle name is Sky, and so Addie got a skyscape on her arm. There it is. Can't really see it, but oh, there it is. Yeah, she got a skyscape with clouds, sun, and I guess a mountain.
Yep.
Yeah. Clouds and sun kind of thing to honor her sister. So that's something now that you know about Addie. Hello.
Hi, Dad. You only got about a month left. Well, that's the newest tattoo.
All right.
I'm Addie here with my dad, who I feel like I might have said this before, but it's still just exciting and I forget about it. So he wrote a whole book once. That's a thing that he's done, which is cool. It was called A Life Mainly Wasted.
I think that's right. I've actually written two books, but I think that was the working title that I had. Yes. I don't think you had mentioned that.
You never told me about the second book. So I knew about the one book though.
That was the second book. The first one was when you were very, very young. So.
Okay, well then I did not absorb the first book at all.
Right.
Anyway, that's cool. That's a thing to do. A big commitment, and cool that you saw it through. But like you said, we're going to be a little more organic this season. So today our question is, what's the big deal about leaving home?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, as we were talking about topics, this is kind of the one that one of the big major life transitions if you're in a sort of a regular life, kind of the first big one that you're going to reach. You spend a lot of time growing up in your family's home, and there comes a time, usually when you're done with high school, but not always, when you step out and leave home. And it's one of, it's really kind of the first major adult transition that you'll make. And there's tons of, practice things along the way. Addie had a hard time going to sleepovers when she was a kid. We'd get the call at 10:30 or 11 that Addie was upset. We needed to bring her home for, I don't know, it's probably.
I like my bed so much. Sleeping on the floor, there's got to be a really strong reason to do it.
Yeah. Well, that's so transitions are tough anyway. A lot of people struggle with transitions in their lives, and this is a big major one when you leave home, whether you're going to college, whether you're starting a job and moving out into an apartment, or joining the service or Peace Corps or some service, armed services or other social service thing where you're going away and you're living, you're going to be living away from what's familiar, and it can be intimidating. How did you? I mean, you're the one who's gone through this most recently. It was about almost 6 years. Almost 6 years ago that you left us to move to go away to college in Nashville. You were 2,000 miles away. How did that feel to you? What, we had a bit of a rough moving experience because it was raining and so much wet, ruined. You were on top of everything else, you were dealing with that. So, I mean, but there was a lot more angst underneath that.
Well, the acute stress was a lot. The move-in weekend. Moving is such a thing. I am a move in 2 days kind of person. And that's not really something you can do when you're moving from across the country. You kind of just have to get the bare bones and then figure out what else you need. Because you don't drive with all of it.
Yeah.
And I was moving in with someone I met once. And I never shared a room either. So that was a cause of anxiety too. So a lot of the acute stress was really intense. But I remember like the first week after like classes started and everything, like that first weekend, and it wasn't orientation activities, it was just like me at college. I was like, what did I just do? What? Um, but also I'm really stubborn. And I was like, everyone in Walnut Creek, when I told them I was going to move to Nashville for college, was like, that's so far. And I didn't think of that like that way because Callie went to Philadelphia. So I was like, Nashville's like half the distance. What are they talking about? Not realizing that all my friends had really just stayed in California and the West Coast. So once I moved, I kind of realized how big a move I had made. And that was scary, but I also was not about to give in and give up. And I was like, well, the only choice is to just keep doing it. So let's just keep throwing spaghetti at the wall and hope it sticks. And it did. I eventually figured it out. It took about a year and a half to really get settled in Nashville as like a place I wanted to be. But after that year and a half, it was good. It definitely didn't help that the first year was 2016 and I was coming from San Francisco to the South, where you were accused of not being left enough if you were voting for Hillary, to the South, where if you said you were voting for Hillary, everyone was like, you don't want Trump. So big culture shock.
Yeah, and you were raised in a house that was not particularly religious, in fact, not religious at all, and going to a college, a self-identified Christian college, and we were aware of that. You were aware of that, made an informed choice about it, but
well, I was somewhat aware, and then I got there and they were like, hey, guess what? We have a university hymn and you have to go to 10 hours of Christian classes. And I was like, what?
yeah,
I have to do what?
We knew about that, but they didn't emphasize it. They didn't emphasize it.
No, they did not. They did not. They were like Christian seminars. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And they were like, actually, that's just daily chapel. That's your option. You go to the chapel. And I was like, what?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's convocation credits or things that we knew about. So but there was a lot of culture shock as well as just the shock of not being in a familiar place with familiar people. I remember that in my college. Well, so my college, my standard line is I didn't leave home, home left me. I mean, I separated from my family as a senior in high school. We were living in Denver. My father had been working in Chile. He was a geologist, exploration geologist, and Chile is a copper. Copper was his specialty, and Chile is the world's largest copper producer. By far. And so he was developing mines, mineral deposits and copper mineral deposits in Chile. And he'd been doing that commuting from Denver, where we were living at the time. And, when that got all set and it looked like these projects were going to need, were viable projects and we're going to need that project management on site, then he moved our family. Sort of. We kind of fractured our family and moved to where we each could maximize our, what we wanted to do. And I was in my senior year of high school, and I was like, I don't want to move my senior year of high school because he was living at 13,000 feet in the Andes Mountains in a camp. And, my mom, your grandmother, was teaching your Uncle Sean, who was our youngest. My brother's 5.5 years younger than me. And, he was still, I guess he was in middle school years in school. My sister was in high school. She was starting high school, would have been probably a sophomore at that point. And they put her in a high school, in a U.S. accredited high school in Santiago, Chile, which was 1,500 miles from where my parents were working. So I was in Denver finishing my high school, living with friends of the family. My sister was a sophomore in high school, and she was living with a Chilean family in Santiago, while my parents and my younger brother were at 13,000 feet in the Andes in a mining exploration camp, a mineral exploration camp. And so that was a bit different. My transition really about leaving home was more about, I was in the familiar place, right? I was still in Denver. I was with all my friends. My high school, I knew my high school, I knew the teachers. So I was the one who was actually the most stable in that sense. And I had a year of that, which was a little weird, living with family, friends. It's not the same as living with your family. And my living situation was a little bit unusual in that the family I was living with lived next door to us in Denver, but the parents were divorcing. She was living with her lover and soon to be husband and all of her kids and his big German Shepherd dog. So we had a mixed family when I was in Denver. I was kind of the border, but they were also integrating a family with a new partner with the mom's relationship. And so it was it wasn't a usual parting. My experience was not a usual, leaving home. And, following that year, I moved then to college and moved away to college. And again, that was actually fairly familiar to me because I went to college, only 15 miles from where my grandparents lived. And so I had a lot of relatives in the area. So I didn't have your experience at all. My experience was a lot different in a couple of ways. But it was definitely that transition is unsettling. It was unsettling when my family left and I was with friends of the family. And, at 17 years old, which was what I was, I just turned 17 when all this happened in high school. I was kind of like, okay, pretty self-absorbed. And, as I said, most of the stuff was familiar to me and I had a little less structure. I mean, the expectations on me were not parental expectations. So I had a little more freedom. I was the oldest kid in the house. There were 3 children. I was a senior. Karen was the oldest in the family I was living with, was a junior in high school. Susan was a sophomore. And Brian, I think, was in 7th grade, maybe 8th. But I was the oldest. I had a car. My parents left me with the family car. So I was mobile. And, it didn't suck. That senior high school was a lot of fun. But it was still unsettling. There were certainly times when I felt alone and, even though I had my good friends around me, it wasn't the same as having family around me. Your situation, you moved away from all your friends. You knew, you'd met Olivia once.
Yep. At orientation after we decided to live together.
Yeah. And, we met the families and, the moving in is wild and, it's all very overwhelming. I remember pulling up and having just these kids descend on the car and pulling stuff out of the trunk and out of the
trauma. That is my nightmares still.
Yeah. It was pretty crazy. And they lost some of the stuff, right? It went into a different floor as they were moving stuff up. So we had to go track down 2 or 3 boxes of things.
Yeah.
50 suitcases or whatever, because we'd flown out. You're right. We didn't drive. So we were traveling pretty light. But we had done the shopping run to Bed Bath and Beyond and Target and that kind of thing. But yeah, you said it took a year and a half. That surprises me. My transition in college was much quicker than that. But again, I was in a more familiar environment. I went to the college that my father did. I had relatives in the area. I was familiar with the area, so it was maybe not quite as disruptive for me. But
I had some extenuating circumstances that were not related to my move that were happening also that kind of were accentuated by the distance. So it made me not like Nashville because I felt alone because of things that happened in Nashville or stuff that happened back home that I was just now dealing with the consequences of.
What are those? What sorts of things do you mean there?
That was the abusive relationship I was in with Colin. And some stuff that happened with untrustworthy guys freshman year.
Okay.
That we don't need to get into on the podcast.
Oh, we can. It's awkward family conversations. If not now, when?
Maybe never.
Can we talk about making
I dealt with it in therapy, but I didn't start therapy until after my freshman year of college. So that freshman year was just rough. I fell in with a group of people that I didn't really like. They didn't really respect me, but I didn't really know who else to try to make friends with. I was going through a manic episode, so I was kind of all over the place. I like to affectionately call my second semester of college the dark semester because I don't remember anything. I remember very little of it. I got the worst grades by far that I've ever gotten in my life that semester. Didn't fail anything though. Woo. but I came pretty close. Forgot, just like straight up didn't do a couple assignments, like big projects, turned those in super late because I just didn't do them.
Mhm.
It was a weird semester, and I came out of it just feeling dazed. And I remember the last like week of being there where I was like trying to deal with moving out, because now I have to do the whole move-in thing, but this time alone with no car.
Right.
So no family, just me and my roommate and her little tiny sedan.
Yeah.
Going to our storage unit, loading everything out. It's 3 billion degrees because it's Nashville summer. I remember just being so excited to just leave. And I was like, I'm not saying I'm not coming back, but oh God, I don't want to be here. Like, I just need some space. And like towards the end of freshman year, I'd heard a lot growing up that like you make the friends you have for life in college. And I don't know if it was because it was accidentally portrayed this way, or I just interpreted it to mean like the people you meet freshman year, you're going to be friends with forever, despite only meeting 1 or 2 people that I felt that way about freshman year, and having them be going through their own stuff too. So I felt really alone most of the time. But when I left, I was like, all right, I'm going to go back. I'm going to have this summer. I'm going to go back. We're going to try again. We'll see how it goes. Got really close to dropping out sophomore year, first semester. Didn't turn my shit around. Dang it.
That's a Venmo. There's one.
Sure is. Turned my stuff around. By the end of the first semester sophomore year, I was like, actually, I started seeing the things to like about Nashville, and started making a lot of strides in therapy. And honestly, like, it's kind of cheesy to say, but the thing that made me like Nashville was realizing that I liked myself.
Well, that goes a long way to, I mean, you like where you are. If you like yourself, you like where you are. I mean, I
started having more genuine connections with people, which is really the thing about a place for me, is I can be pretty much anywhere and be happy pretty much anywhere, as long as I have a community and a lot of roots in that place. And I started really setting those down sophomore year. I got a job that was outside of school, made friends inside and outside of school. Once I moved off campus, everything kind of fell into place too, which was right after sophomore year. That was pretty much when I moved to Nashville, like full time, and then only started coming home for breaks, like holidays.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's sort of I think there's a couple things about leaving home, right? I mean, you have the safety net gone in a lot of respects, but you also have none of the rules, and so I never drank in high school. And when I got to college, I was in Wisconsin, and the drinking age in Wisconsin was 18 for everything. I came from Colorado, where it was a 3-2 state. So at 18, you could drink 3.2% alcohol beer, but you had to wait to 21 before you could drink wine, spirits, and any beer that was more than 3.2% alcohol. But I never did. I didn't drink at all, and I didn't drink at all first semester sophomore year or freshman year. But I did discover alcohol my second semester, and that was also the time when I had first girlfriend I've had. I didn't date at all in high school, and so and of course you're on a campus. Nobody's there to monitor when you're coming in or rolling out. Nobody's there to see if you're going to class or not. I mean,
but you do have like a family in a way in the dorm room of like, people on your floor. Like, there's a lot of people that you like are not responsible to necessarily, but you're still kind of always surrounded by people.
You are. Which
was a big change for me, was going from having a very small nuclear family to suddenly there's just so many people around all the time.
Interesting. Yeah, because I did share a room for many years with my brother, and so having a roommate wasn't I hadn't done it in a few years, but it wasn't unfamiliar to me. And having that family actually was good for me. I had a lot of good friends in high school, and I still have those friendships. In fact, I saw one for lunch today. But when you said that, the people that you meet freshman year, a lot of times they become your friends for life, and it's because you're going through this intense experience together. And it's true. I have, there were 6 guys that I consider very close friends, even today, 40 years later, that, I met those first couple of weeks in our dorm. And, I subsequently have other friends that maybe even closer to me that I've added through the years. But when you're away, when everybody's away from home for the first time and having that experience, you're going through stuff together. It's bonding. It really does bond you, or it can bond you. It doesn't have to. And you can have bonding experiences that aren't like this, but it lends itself that first intense, you're homesick, but you're also exhilarated and stimulated because it's new. Everything's new, but nothing's familiar. So you're feeling the lack and that loss of familiarity, but you're also stimulated because of all of this stuff that's just new stimulation. And as you go through those experiences with people together, you create bonds that can last, even as you learn, well, we're really not very similar. There was a line in the movie The Big Chill where somebody says, there's a bunch of people that get together at the funeral of one of their college friends, and they're, midlife, they're in their 40s, probably late 30s, 40s, whatever. And they're talking, and somebody says something about, well, we were really good friends. And I think it's Jeff Goldblum's character says, no, we were people who were thrown into an intense situation for a short period of time. And that's essentially what that first blast of college in particular is. But it's true also if you go into the military service or other places where you're going to be surrounded by people in the same situation you are, is that you have a shared experience automatically with these folks. And by having that, especially if it's intense emotional thing, because you're feeling that excitement as also you're also feeling trepidation, those are really strong emotions that are going to be, and you're tying these people, you're associating these people with those strong emotions, and it can lead to lifelong friendships and really bond you in a lot of ways. Doesn't have to, but it definitely did for me. That was certainly the experience that I had in college. And like I say, we've lost two of the guys that were freshmen with in college are dead now. One died at 50 and the other at 56, 57, something like that. But there are still, there's still another 4 of us or 5 of us that are, hanging out, and we added another guy the next year to that group. And so, it is a time as when you leave home for the first time, you're on your own. One, you don't have a lot of life experiences, so you are going to have those relationships. You are going to have those bad decisions you make, waking up and not remembering because you're blackout drunk, don't remember what happened. You haven't learned how to handle your intense emotions. And so, you end up making stupid decisions or bad decisions or decisions that turn out badly. And, there's a lot of learning that happens when you move away from home that you can't really train for, because there's no.
Part of the reason why my freshman year was so rough was one of those people that I initially really bonded with and thought was going to be one of the college friends of mine, and I spent a lot of time with him, ended up assaulting me. And everyone that we had mutual friends with took his side. So my options were have no friends or continue to hang out with this friend group and just never be vulnerable or emotional or in any way yourself around them.
Right. Yeah, you're guarding in that case, which isn't really friends, right? I mean,
so that caused a lot of shutdowns inside of my brain. But then it was sophomore year when I moved in with same roommate, and then her other friends who really weren't a part of that friend group at all. And then a new girl too, who we didn't even know, who turned out to be awesome and is still one of my closest friends now. And we all moved in together, and that was that kind of was what turned it around for me, because those were the people that I really started having the open, vulnerable connection with, because there wasn't those relationships weren't tainted with anything. There was no this guy, are you on his side or my side? Do you believe me? Are you still talking to him? I didn't have to worry about people bringing him over into my apartment anymore, until someone on my floor started dating him, which sucked.
Yeah.
But
I get that. And these are the life experiences that you have, and they're super painful. And again, I think a lot of it is just because you don't have the experience. So everything is new. All your experiences are relatively new when you leave home. You leave that sort of protective cocoon where you had people who were invested in your safety and interested in your life. Nobody's going to have that same attention. You're not going to get that same attention typically from the people you meet when you leave home. They're not going to be as emotionally invested in you as your parents are, and as your siblings are, and as your, the friends that you grew up with and went to high school are. And so you have to kind of earn that back. And like you say, a lot of it is, you have to experiment, because not everybody is going to be worthy of your trust. And you
And it
happen
can
to
be
find
really
people that weren't.
alienating in that time, because when everybody that I knew and had been growing close to kind of chose him, it's not even that they chose him over me. It was that they were like, oh, well, we'll just continue being friends with both of you. And I was like, well, you are choosing him if you're continuing to be friends with him. Like, he assaulted me. Like,
Yeah. Well, and there's don't rock the boat. It's like, well, I don't want to choose. So I'll just kind of pretend it didn't happen. And life, that's a good lesson for all of us to remember. And I think it's Elie Wiesel's quote about if you're indifferent in the face of oppression, then you're on the side of the oppressor.
yes.
And sexual assault is a extremely common thing that happens usually against women, disproportionately high, of course, against women. And so, and typically the woman is not lying. Sometimes they do, and those anecdotes really undermine the claim, the legitimate
really
claims.
do.
But generally speaking, the odds are, if a woman tells you she's been assaulted, she's been assaulted. And but at 18, people don't have that information. It's when it's personal.
I didn't know how to put it into words, and there was so much behind it, because this was a guy that I really trusted, and then I ended up in a situation that I wouldn't end up in around a stranger,
right?
Where I was way too drunk, but he was someone I trusted, and I was like, he's not going to do anything, and then
he did.
He did. So that was that. I went through a long period before I even called it assault, because I felt like it was my fault for putting myself in that situation and for trusting him. And it wasn't until I realized, like, no, you should be able to trust people who tell you that they have your best interest and like express a deep amount of care to you, not to rape you. So unfortunately.
Well, no, it's you're right. And you were trusting because you hadn't had an experience that would tell you, I need to be careful in this situation, right? And you're behaving in a manner consistent with that trust that you've granted, because you felt it was worthy. It had been, it was safe and fair to do that. And now, having had the experience, you'd be a lot more cautious with somebody that you don't know that well. But at the time, you didn't know.
It wasn't just that one time too, freshman year, later years too. But it's definitely like, it's shaped for better or for worse how much I want to be around men ever. And I just really don't trust men easily at all now, because too many of them have not been trustworthy. So it takes a bit to earn that, which sucks, and that's not really what I wanted to do. but
that's what your life experiences says you have to do to keep yourself safe, and that's valid, right? That's your life experience, and that's what you've lived. So now you have to honor that. You have to protect yourself to stay safe. So that's what you have to do. And a lot of this, and I think a lot of these experiences that we have as people recently leaving that protective cocoon that has kept us safe, it comes about because the cocoon is no longer there, and this is why we try to instill values and teach you to think about things, and it's all to protect you when you do leave the nest. You need to we try to hone skills and everything, but there's no substitute for actually doing it. And people leave families, their homes, and have wonderful experiences. My experience was pretty good overall. There were certain things that I did, certainly, I regret. But thinking about what my parents could have done or what my family could have done to protect me from those things, it's kind of like, probably not much more than they did do. Some things you have to learn by experience, and it's there's risk there, right? Bad things can happen, and it's what we've talked to you guys about. It's the worst outcomes that happen when people are injured or killed or raped or assaulted, often happen because it's not the first decision you make, but it's the second and third decisions that also go bad, and at that point you're down a path that doesn't leave you to much room to recover. And the experience that you're talking about, if you would have moderated your alcohol intake, you probably would have ended up in a different situation because you would have identified the threats earlier, or you would have been more conscious of what happened.
I don't know
But
if
you
I'd
felt
go that
safe.
far.
Well,
It
but you
was
felt safe.
kind of something that he was planning on doing. So
Right. But
it
if you
was
had been
not.
more sober, would you feel like you maybe have been better prepared or been able to react in a different way?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would have been able to like leave.
Yeah, well, and so, but that's what I mean, it's the decisions we make, and that's not to let him off the hook. He assaulted you, and that stands by itself as a horrible thing that he did. But if you could have ameliorated that a bit, a decision to drink because you felt safe in that environment, drink to excess, and that left you less capable of dealing with things. But even that wouldn't have been in the absence, then going off alone, would have, that was the second thing. And so it's this combination of these experiences, and those are the things you really can't anticipate. And we can talk a bit about it, but you can't practice those things. And so I think a lot of what happens when we leave home, and the reason it's a big deal is because we're having life experiences, and a lot of life experiences that we haven't practiced before, and we're not really, and we muddle through. Some of them turn out great because we can anticipate and we can expect, the things that we expect, it turns out that way. But an awful lot of these things are things that we're experiencing for the first time. And again, there's that invigoration, that excitement because it's new, but there's also the trepidation and the fear because it's unknown. Those are intense feelings that we have, and combine that with these experiences we're having for the first time, because we don't know how to handle this kind of thing. And you can have a whole range of outcomes that can be fabulous to really scary. And I think when we talk about leaving home, that's essentially that's the big deal. That's why this first transition from what's familiar and how you grew up into independent living, which is essentially what we're talking about here. That's why it's such a big deal, because you got to learn an awful lot of stuff really quickly, and not all of it's going to do. Some of it will be great, and some of it is not going to be great. Some of it's going to be really, really crappy. And so
And you don't have a control over all of it too, which is something that I needed to learn, was there are things that are going to happen to you.
Yes.
And I spent my time dwelling on what would have happened if I had drunk less at that party or any other time, or what would have happened if I had not trusted this person. But at the same time, like, I have learned that train of thought is really not productive.
Yeah, you can't change it, right? You have to learn from it.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
No, you're right.
So that helped alleviate a lot of the guilt that I had from that situation. That was, not my fault. Like,
no,
people get blackout drunk at parties all the time and don't get raped. It's not that they got lucky. It's that there wasn't a rapist there.
Right. And people go off by themselves with friends, people they think of as friends, and don't get raped. None of this stuff excuses or justifies in any way what happened to you. But and the reason you made the choices you did is because you felt safe making them. You weren't thinking, oh, this is going to be a problem. No, you weren't. And because you had no life experience that said it would.
Yeah. Well,
At
that point, I had drunk to excess at a couple parties, and really the only difference at that party was that I drank to excess a lot quicker than other people did. I don't remember going off alone with him. That was not a conscious decision that I made. That was something that I was told later, was that me and this guy disappeared for several hours, and then I came to on a bench, alone.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting time of my life. But that was definitely that event, and then the following manic episode and other things that I did to cope with it without dealing with it, kind of set off just a chain of events that made that year adjusting to not being home a lot harder, because
you had a really bad thing, really traumatic thing happen to you when you left home. And you're right, you had to deal with that. You had to deal with the emotions, you had to deal with the sort of mental side of it, the physical side you had to recover. Those are all very real things, and they shape your experience. And you're right, you had to process that in your way, this very traumatic thing. And you had to do it alone. There wasn't a lot of people around you. And you got no support from your friends.
The people who were around me were like, it's fine.
Well, they just,
didn't
yeah,
wanna
it was
talk to me.
uncomfortable. It was too uncomfortable for them to manage and deal with, because they were also going through their own transitions. And it's kind of like, I'm dealing with my own crap here. I can't take on anymore. And I don't want to take on anymore, first of all.
Mhm.
And that's harsh. I mean, this is, and I know people in my college who had, probably had similar experiences that you had, but certainly had traumatic experiences that weren't the positive experience that I had in my, finding a friend group that I fit well with and could trust. And being a guy is a lot different than being a woman at 18 for sure.
Yes.
And, our campus was smaller than yours by a lot. So it was easier to kind of identify the predators and the people that were at risk.
Yeah.
But I'm 100% positive there were sexual assaults at my college too, because there is sexual assaults every day at colleges all over the place. And a lot of it, again, is people being away from home, being away from that protective cocoon for the first time. And in that situation, you can take advantage of people, or you can be naive enough to think that, because nothing ever happened when I was growing up, when I had this protective cocoon around me, that I'm not going to be, that it can't happen to me. And it does. And that's one of the life lessons, I think, regardless of the transitions that you go through in your life, is understanding that, yeah, things can happen to you. I remember your Uncle Rick, when he had his leukemia diagnosis, he said a lot of people say, why me? Why am I the one who gets this rare cancer? And he says, I think that's the wrong question. The question is, why not me? What would make me special that I would be exempt from, these things that happen to people in their lives? There's nothing special about me that would stop leukemia from coming into my body. So, see, our audio intern is in the house.
Our audio intern is in the house. She was like, Mom's talking about sad things. I got to go sit on her.
Yeah.
She very politely asked to come up on my lap. So I had to oblige.
Yeah. Well, So I think when we, as we talk about their, major life transitions, and the first one being getting out on your own and leaving home without the safety net of parents and friends and family around to kind of help you navigate these situations, there's an awful lot of education. There's a very steep learning curve that happens out of that in that time period. And sometimes it can be great, like it was for me. And sometimes it can really suck, like it did for you.
The thing about it now, and I guess we're at the final message that I don't want to impart on that chapter of my life, is that really beautiful things have come out of it. And I'm not gonna say like, I wouldn't be who I am today if it didn't happen. So
I'm glad it happened to me.
Thankful for it, because no, I'm not. I wish it didn't. But my roommate Olivia at the time, we've had several long conversations since then, because this guy was a problem for both of us. It wasn't just me who was one victim of his. And so a lot of why she didn't confront it was because if she had to confront what happened to me, that would mean that she had to confront what he had been doing to her too. And that's even harder, as it turns out. So we've had some really wonderful conversations since then about, how we weren't there for each other and how we let ourselves down because of that. And our friendship is, I don't want to say it suffered, because that was our first year of knowing each other. That kind of was just the basis of our friendship, was both of us getting assaulted together and being like, what the heck do we do? And since then, like, she's become one of the few people who like really understands that time of my life. And she talks to me about that time of her life, because she was also going through stuff that she hasn't gone through since and never gone through before too. And telling the story about the man who assaulted me to Eric actually was what got me to trust him, because that was a long time before we started dating. And he put something on his Instagram about, like, if I'm friends with your abuser, let me know and I'll change that. And I knew that he worked with this guy. So I was like, all right, here goes nothing. I'm just going to tell yet another Belmont guy about this. But at that point, I'd had enough. That was after graduation. So I'd had enough years between when he assaulted me and then to be like, if this guy doesn't believe me, then, screw him. But he did believe me without even questioning it. And I was like, oh, I think he might be, maybe he's different than I gave him credit for being. And he was. And now we've been dating for a year.
It's been a year already. Outstanding. Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, the numbers are on his side. The logical thing for people to do is believe the woman.
And that was exactly what he said about
universal,
it too.
But the odds are, believe the woman. If you're betting the odds, bet on the woman's story.
And I mean, even if you if the woman ends up being wrong, that's one of those things where men's lives aren't ruined
Right.
by this ever, even if they
No.
did do it. You just say you're sorry and you move on. You believed the wrong person, and this guy gets off, and everyone knows it was a lie, and we move on with our lives. Whereas if you don't believe the woman and it did happen, how many more people are getting sexually assaulted because you're letting this guy get a pass?
Yeah, no, that's right.
So, that's one of the things for me is that the consequences are vastly different.
Yeah.
And I would rather believe a woman and be wrong than believe an abuser and be wrong.
Can be wrong. No, I agree. That's right. But again, your odds are much better by believing the woman, just period, straight up. So,
Indeed, by a lot.
yeah. Well, and these, it's not to say that these life-changing events can happen only when you're, in these transition periods. I mean, you mentioned yours, so first semester sophomore year, that was my dark period, actually. The girlfriend that I had in the second semester of my freshman year broke up. We broke up, sort of broke up. It really, I mean, I had no experiences with a relationship, so I was not prepared for this. And I handled it about as badly as you possibly could. And that brought all kinds of trauma for me, changed the course of my life. But that was well after, 2 years after I left home is when I had that particular experience. It's just that again was a new experience for me. The dating was new experience for me. The girlfriend was a new experience for me. And the breakup was a new experience for me. And that all happened in that calendar year of 1979. And I almost got sent home on that fall semester. It was very bad. And, so those traumatic events can happen even outside of kind of these transition periods that we're talking about. And, the whole thing, our whole season here and Awkward Family Conversations this time is really about the transitions and what the kind of disruption those create, and what that means for our lives. And, so as I think about, kind of, how do you manage transitions, or how do you avoid having your situation happen to you? A lot of it is just kind of go very slow. Don't change a lot of your behaviors. Trust your behaviors and take your time.
Yeah.
Don't rush into things. Don't just assume that everything is how it always has been for you.
And listen to what you want to, because that's really something I didn't do freshman year. I realized after I moved to Nashville, I was like, I have no idea how to do college or how to do Tennessee or how to do making new friends, because I haven't had to make new friends in 16 years.
Right.
So I've got nothing. What is happening? And so I just kind of wung it. I went with what everyone else was doing, or what other people said was fun, or when other people wanted to eat dinner, or where they wanted to go. And I didn't really make any purposeful choices for myself or what I wanted, because I do like drinking and I do like partying, and I definitely would have done that. But I would have focused on the fact that I like having deep personal connections more than that. And instead of ending up with friends who were all about only partying, I could have more quickly ended up with friends who were about drinking in our dorm room and having deep conversations and watching musicals. Because that's way more fun to me than going to a big party. But I didn't know how to find those people, and I didn't even really know that they were what I was looking for, because I was just going with what everyone said college was supposed to be, and this is what everyone else is doing, so I'll just go here, I guess.
Do that.
And then it wasn't, I mean, we'll talk about this more next week, talking about moving. I've during this stage of my life, post college, I've been a lot more intentional about the kind of person I want to be and what I actually want my life to look at. And because of that, it's really manifesting.
You stole my thunder. I was just going to ask you, it doesn't sound like you were being intentional about the person, about what you wanted in your life. And to me, that's right. The way you manage transitions and upheavals and disruptions in your life is to think about who you want to be and set intentions around that. And you won't be perfect. We all make mistakes, right? And there's things that we assume that turn out not to be true, and we have to adapt. But 80% of your problems are going to be solved if you're not just kind of going along with what other people are deciding. If you're intentional about, this is who I want to be. I want to be the student, or I want to be a balanced individual who doesn't neglect studying. In my college, we lost about a third of our incoming class in the first 2 semesters, because people just couldn't handle that being away from home. Sometimes some people couldn't handle it academically, right? The academic load is a lot higher in college, and some people who go into the service just can't handle, kind of being alone, even though that's highly structured. There's a lot of expectations that come, and people haven't really been intentional about the kind of environment they want and the kind of person they want to be in that environment, and how different decisions would manifest themselves. And I think by setting intention is the way to manage through situations with which you are not familiar. And it's really about the only way that you can get through that. Because if you're setting intentions, that allows you maybe to do a little bit more research.
It allows you to do more research, and I feel like it allows you to do more self-research.
Exactly. Yeah.
I
good
call
point.
it my method for finding the intentions and making intentional decisions is what I like to call find the why.
Find the why.
In which I'm a really annoying child, and for every thought I have, I go, why?
Why?
Why? Why?
Yeah.
So stuff like now, thinking when I was, well, this is another topic later in the season, but when I was thinking about, we'll skip that. We'll just get why did I want to move to Nashville? For me, I wanted to get out of California, and I stopped there. I was like, I want to move somewhere else. And then I did not finish that sentence.
Yeah.
And never found I did later find the answer of that, which was 2 years from then. And the answer of that was that I felt, since I'd grown up in the same place all 18 years of my life, I felt like there was a person that I was in middle school and elementary school even, and people just kind of assumed was me. And I never got to explore different identity as being, I never got to explore exactly who I wanted to be at 18, because I had decided what I was going to strive for at 12.
Yeah.
And things change. And when I got to college and I started going after that why and that kind of stuff, I realized, like, why am I afraid of changing in front of people who had known me? Why am I afraid of being so different the next day than I was the day before? And the answer to that is I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
So started actually just kind of doing whatever I wanted. And when that happened, it started bringing in people who matched that energy, and it worked out.
Yeah, and it generally does. When you're intentional, you generally end up where you want to be. And you surround yourself with people who share a lot of the values and a lot of the goals and a lot of the interests, which
because it really comes back to, when you ask yourself why that many times about every single decision you make, it always comes back to a core value. You make a decision based off of what your values are. When I went to college, I had no idea what mine were, because I just never tried. I didn't know that was something that I should access, because I was 18.
Exactly. And I would say that makes you probably, with 80% of the 18-year-olds out there. I mean, we don't think consciously and with intent, because our lives are carefully managed by parents in a lot of places. And that's not true universally. There's a lot of single parent households and
for sure,
people who are growing up in really unfortunate and negative family environments. But in most places, not perfect, but a lot of people are protected. A lot of kids, a lot of 18-year-olds have been protected for a long time.
Definitely me.
And they're curated. Yeah, definitely you.
That was the experience I had, for sure. So it was definitely different.
And all your friends too, right? All your friends. So they didn't know how to even talk about this kind of thing. And so, but getting away, leaving home is a really momentous time in a life. Mm-hmm. And it's when you stop, and we'll talk about, when you leave college, right? You stop learning and start doing everything up through all your whole education. When education is your emphasis and your focus, you're learning how to do things, but you're not actually doing them. And when you leave college, when you leave that education environment, whether it's after high school or after college or after graduate school, then you start doing what you've been trained to do. And that's a whole different thing. And we'll talk about going into
leaving college was a similar kind of leaving home for me, because I was so used to education, and I was very good at school, and I was very comfortable in school. And so when that stopped, I spent the first year out of college trying to find a goal, trying to figure out where I wanted to go back to school, what I wanted to do, having a career trajectory mapped out. And it wasn't until cycling through like 5 of those back to back that I realized maybe I don't have to do this right now. And it's okay to be directionless for a little bit, because that's fine. Like I'm evolving in different ways. I'm evolving in relationships, and I'm
Yeah.
figuring out more about what matters to me people wise,
Mhm.
and relationships wise, and home wise, and cat wise.
Right.
um,
Yeah, I hear you. And I would say that I've spent most of my life kind of not living intentionally, or certainly around my career and those kind of, or in a lot of ways, even with family, I've been very accepting of what's kind of found me, as opposed to going after things that I thought, geez, I would be interested in doing that. And I left. I mean, I didn't leave college until they threw me out. I went back for a ninth semester tuition free because I was a good student. And like you say, I did college really, really well. And I didn't want to leave. And even when I left, I didn't want to leave. I moved into a house down the street and still hung out at college. Still went to the sporting events, still went to the campus bars. I mean, I knew everybody. So leaving college for me was very tough. In fact, I was telling my friend that I ate lunch with today, my man Dean, that he's got a son who's your age, who's dealing with the post-college, trying to get a job, and it's been very challenging. First of all, dealing with COVID at this time, and secondly, it's a hard transition anyway. And he's shy, Dean's son is shy, and that makes it even harder. Yeah, and so I shared my story about it took me 4 or 5 years after I left college before I found a job that I spent more than 10 months at. And an aborted return to college and graduate school. And I mean, I really struggled for about 5 years after college. And that wasn't leaving home. That was leaving what was familiar in terms of what I did every day, studying.
Thematically, education is kind of a home. You spend 18 years of your life there. So that's a lot of years
in my case, but yeah.
A lot of years.
A lot of years, right. And that's what's familiar, and leaving the familiar can be really traumatic. And and other times, you look at your cousin Liz. I mean, she went into a nursing program which had a very clear path from school to the workplace. And she's very mature and very grounded. And for her, that transition was easy. Well, I'm probably making it. I mean, it looked easy. She made it look easy. She didn't have the doubts, and she didn't have the, oh my God, what am I going to do now kind of thing. It was, and she did it. She went to school in her hometown. She went to college in her hometown. A year at IU, and then back to Marion in Indianapolis. So she was around what she knew. A lot of her friends were still around. So, so that transition was easier for her. I mean, it looked easier. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but and then that can be really, really tough. A lot of people even struggle when they leave home to find the right college. And at Evergreen State University up in Washington, it was really fascinating to realize that 2/3 of those students, I think, were transfer students. They didn't find what they were looking for in their first choice of college, and found had to keep looking and find it elsewhere. So fascinating stuff. So that's what we've got today. Why? What's the big deal about leaving home? Well, it's a big deal. There's a lot of reasons why it's a big deal to leave home. So let's see. We've got nothing that needs to be researched because we're doing this more organically. We didn't talk about it, but there is a Venmo that needs to be done. So I will collect my $1 for Addie's slip of the tongue earlier. So send me that $1 and watch your language.
I don't have to pay you for that.
No, you do not. That is fair.
Here's your $1.
All right. Oh, there it is. $1. Thank you. Thank you, Ad. What do we have next week?
Next week is going to be, what is the big deal about moving?
Moving geographies.
Yeah. Where are you leaving somewhere you're comfortable for somewhere new, not necessarily tied to education or entering adulthood.
Yeah.
Just moving. Just
picking up and moving. Well, that'll be interesting because we both have, I have a lot of experience doing that, and we're both going to probably have experience with that this year. So,
well, mine's next year. We're leaving 2023. But
fair. All right. Yeah. Fair point.
We're going to Denver. We're aiming for New Year's in Denver.
Okay. 2024.
We're aiming to spend New Year's this year in Denver to make sure we like it, and then trying to move there once wherever we live together in Nashville, that lease is up. So this summer we're moving in together. Next summer we're leaving Nashville finally.
Leaving Nashville. Interesting. Cool. All right. Well, take us home then, and
All right.
get out of here.
Well, you can find us in the meantime on awkwardfamilyconversations.com, on Twitter at awkwardfamilyc1. Got to fire up those audio intern pictures again.
Yeah.
On YouTube to watch the video versions at Awkward Family Conversations. Facebook also at Awkward Family Conversations. That's where we post links to everything. And then you can just listen to the non-video version, which, why would you? There's cats. On Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you get all of your favorite podcasts, and let us know what you think. Keep questions and suggestions coming. And I guess you'll see us next week. We don't see the audience, so.
We won't see you, but you'll see us. That's fair.
Yes,
Very good.
that's weird.
All right. Thank you, Ed.
All right.
See
I love you,
next
Dad.
week. Love you too. Bye.
Bye.
I think I need to stop recording now.
Oh.